Got hired in a custom fabrication shop as one of their 2 welders. Boss promises to have me learn a bit of everything, machining, water jet, design, but barely even had me do any welding. On top of being a massive cunt to everyone. Talked shit about us to customers while we were working right next to him. Got hired at a different company Thursday evening. Other welder quit Friday morning. I quit Friday at lunch. Felt real good leaving them up shit creek. I wrote this before on another post, but it fits here too. I used to work nights as a cashier at a deli convenience store. Pretty chill job. The manager who worked during the day quit, so my boss asked me to switch and handle manager's responsibilities. I said sure. With a pay raise. He assured me it would only be for a week. So I said fine, I'll do you the favor. So now, I would work 6 AM to 4 PM during the week and 6 AM 11:30 PM during the weekends. The new times also involved a lot more work. I would literally be running the entire store myself, including orders, deliveries, inventory, a bunch of other things that I was not getting paid to do. Should also note that my boss didn't even know how to work the register, let alone anything else that needed to be done. Well, that week turned into a month. I went back into his office, which was a supply closet with a computer in it, to discuss a pay raise, and he asked to take me out to dinner to discuss it. I said no. Told him he had another week to find someone. Next week goes by and it's a Friday. I go up to him and ask him for either a raise or some sort of bonus for all that I've done. He asks about dinner again and I say no. He then says no to the raise or bonus. So I told him I quit. He can show up tomorrow and Sunday 6 AM 11:30 PM because I won't be there. I'm telling this to the man who doesn't know how to open the register. I walk away and go back to the register. He comes up to me 10 minutes later, opens his wallet, and pulls out a $100 bill and gives it to me as my bonus. I take it, put it in my purse and say thank you. I'm still quitting though. The look on his face was amazing. An hour later, I pay myself for the week and left. I asked months in advance for time off during a Friday. I was approved. The fateful Friday came around and everybody I worked with, 4 of us, we are also approved for time off. We all had the same event to attend. The manager calls me the night before and tells me that I need to come in. I told him I had already made the plans and that I was approved months ago with emails to show for it. He responded by telling me if I didn't show I'd be fired. I just didn't go. Fuck you, Jason. Same thing basically happened to me. Was told I'd get time off the weekend before 4th of July. Manager makes a last minute schedule change the day of and tells me it's SOS mandatory to come in. After arguing about how Assad told them 2 months ahead of time. I told her I won't SOT come in ever again and to bite me, then I hung up the phone. Job got a VIP contract to vaccinate a bunch of elite clients. They rushed. They brought on some extra nurses, barely vetted them and began. Virtually no breaks. And piles of paperwork. They didn't finish ordering and setting up the computers, and there was only one computer to chart on like 100 patients a day. Not all the nurses got their clearance for the computer yet either. Scariest part was I had to stop someone from reusing a needle that she didn't realize she used on a previous patient. She told me she only primed it, pushed the air out, but I told her without alarming the patient that it was not suitable. I told her to go away and cleaned up her area. Vaccinated the patient and never went back. I was already sick of them only thinking about the bottom line. Worked at a mall retail store in college for a couple years. When I was just a lowly peasant, the manager was great to work for. Once I became a key holder is when things changed. I learned very quickly why the other key holders didn't last. The manager would make rash decisions that would then be blamed on everyone but her. Last straw was when the evening shift didn't change out some signage and I get in the next morning having no idea there was new signage to be put out. She came in and berated me about the signage not being updated. I walked in the back, dropped my keys off, told her I quit and went to walk out. She grabbed me and told me I need to give a written notice and fax it to corporate. To whom it may concern. I MacLeod terminate my employment effective immediately due to manager's inability to properly treat staff. Double quote. Faxed it and walked out. She read it after I had already sent it and chased me out, berating me more, claiming I would never get another retail job in this mall. Blah blah blah. 3 weeks later I started at another store in that mall and always made it a point to smile and wave at her when I saw her. Edit. For those of you asking, this was at an Oakley Mall location. I used to work as some kind of aid worker rescuer in events with large gathering of people, concerts, festivals, etc. The boss owner always put her head down for the clients and allowed them to exploit us. One of the regular clients was the event manager of a popular stadium. They would ask us to be in the stadium 3 hours prior the event to clean, yup, and stay afterwards to clean, yup. The manager wasn't paying more money for it, but the boss didn't want to lose the client, so we just have to do it. So there would be events with that took 16 hours to complete, with a menial pay, no food or beverage, and with the client expecting us to do more work for free. Note: I've never did that, and always encouraged my partners to leave. It wasn't our job to clean. But the moment that made me say fuck this shit was when the boss called me saying that the client emailed her with a complaint about me. I thought it would be about me and my team always leaving after the job was done and not staying for cleaning. But no. They told me that they always see you chatting with your partner. And with a smile. They don't want the attendants to see their workers distracted and or laughing. They want to show that only professionals work with them. So they are asking that you turn down and notch your positive attitude and keep a poker face all the time. HR dude calls on Friday at 6 PM. Hey. I'm really sorry. The insurance company won't cover you until you're an employee for 60 days. Me. That's a shame. Since you promised that you'd cover me and children right away, that you'd arrange the 60 days going to not apply to me. And I told you that was a condition for me accepting this job. Also, my son's surgery is literally on Monday. In 2 days. Double quote. And he was shocked that I quit the next week. Just totally livid that I gave a week's notice. You know this means you'll never work here again. Yeah George, that's the fucking point. I was hired for a college to run their office where students got hands-on work in the field. When I discovered that they were ripping off students' hours, I started providing students copies of their hours and telling them to keep a notebook with the copies for their records. See, the students were on a contract that if they didn't start graduate by the date estimated for completion, students were required to pay $200 every additional week it took to complete among suspensions, which in turn went against contract graduation date. They also asked me to falsify a report of students' absences to suspend them even though I had documented proof the student was in class. I decided to leave that job, but not before telling students to report them to the state board and providing statements for the lawyer who the students gathered to represent their case. Company promised a retreat in Banff because we hit our sales targets. 2 weeks before the trip, they say it's been cancelled, with no plans to pay us out for the pooled bonus that would have went towards that trip. On the weekend of the trip, a manager posts a photo of her and other managers in Banff. But oh no, it wasn't work related. They said it was for a manager's birthday, even though one of the managers that went absolutely hates the one who was allegedly celebrating the birthday. Quit shortly after. Worked in a mom and pop pet store. On my 3rd shift, they got their shipment of feeder mice in for the reptiles. The mice are shipped alive. Some reptiles need to feed on dead mice. Their process of killing the mice was holding it by the tail and swinging it over your shoulder and slamming into on the ground as hard as you can. If you're not a seasoned veteran of doing this, it takes a few times and it gets bloody. I was told this is the most humane way of killing them, and if I had any other humane suggestions or techniques then to use that. I at least waited until the end of the shift before telling them I won't be coming back. I inherited a pretty substantial amount of money. Not like I never need to work again level. More on the I could be very comfortable for at least 10 years. I got one morning for work at 4 AM as usual. laying in bed playing on my phone for a minute and see that the deposit went through and more money than I've ever seen in my life. Look at the alarm clock. Look at my balance. 2 minutes later. Yeah. So. Sorry about this. Double quote. I worked in a big retail store for about 2 years. I was the only female to work in the electronics section. Not too bad. My co-workers were all super nice, but at times I had to really fight to belong. The managers were the issue. They tried forcing me into shifts in different work areas because they needed people there. I'm all for helping out, but I figured one, they should have talked to me beforehand instead of these shifts just showing up, and two, the hours will be split between a couple people so that one person wasn't being singled out. Nope. I was singled out. These sections also so happen to be traditionally female sections, beauty and clothing. So here I was, the most senior employee in my section, being the only one given full weeks in a work area I had never worked and have no training in. Without anyone talking to me about it. And they refused to say why. So when a schedule came out where I had 40 hours, 20 more than I can work due to school, in the clothing department, I first asked my co-workers if they had shifts outside the electronics department. They all said no, having full hours there. I then later that day put my notice in and told them under no circumstances I was going to work those shifts. Best decision of my life. I remember when I started new job in one factory that was producing windows. It was extremely hard work. Start at 6 AM. Finish at 4 PM. 10 hours of physical exercise like carrying 200 pounds windows. So on the first day there was a breakfast break, and as I sat with co-workers I thought to myself that this job is crazy and I want to leave it immediately. And on the opposite side of the table there was this old smartest worker who looked at me, focused, and said loudly he won't last longer than 1 week here. But I did. I worked there for 8 days just to win my internal battle with this old asshole. I was a dishwasher at a privately owned high-end restaurant. My GF and I had purchased tickets for Manson. And I put in a request for 2 days off. A month in advance. I had mentioned it to the EC, who had said we'll work something out. Double quote. 2 weeks from the days. I mentioned it to the sous chef, who informed me no one gets any day they want off. He had just come back from a week's vacation. Actually tried to give me attitude for mentioning it. I turned in my notice then and there. Electrician here. I used to work at a meat factory. They took butchered meat and processed it into consumer and commercial products. The maintenance manager was a complete cunt. I was unjamming equipment, repairing the leaking roof and snaking drains filled with rotting meat. Not electrician's work. After about 8 months the manager told me I would be installing racking in the blast freezer, minus 25°C, alone. After 3 days of working in alternately minus 25 and plus 30 as I moved racking in and out, he came into the lunchroom and told me that I was taking too long and should have this done by the end of the day. I told him fuck you. I quit, and then I went to HR and quit. 100% would recommend. Oh man, I have a story for this. About 3 years ago, I worked as a paid intern for an oil gas IT company, I don't remember, to build some experience, and during high school. Boss was a real prick, I will go into this later on, and hired me after a few weeks when I was interviewed. During the interview, he asked for my pay rate. I was told $10 HR and told him that. He said okay, and that was it. Job was easy. Just copy notes from paper to a software for them. A lot changed within the second week in. It was more of the boss wanting me to sort of copy the exact same graph from a picture he wanted me to do. So I did what he said with no questions asked. He wanted me to list some stuff on eBay which somehow didn't want to work properly on the computer I was on. Fast forward to payday. I didn't get paid. Why? Turns out the lady left early and never had the check wrote out for me. I complained about this to the boss, which was I promise tomorrow you will get it. And where did that go? 2 weeks of paycheck not being done for. So again I complained until the boss actually wrote it out, and I realized one mistake. I was being paid around $8 HR and was never told, according to him. I was told that and I don't listen. I was on the verge to quit this shit but forward to my uncle. Sadly losing the battle to cancer. Passing away and having to call work about missing for a funeral. Few days after that, I get called into a personal meeting with the boss. The boss tells me that I couldn't miss work at all. At this point, I told him that my uncle passed and I had to attend his funeral. He went on about I understand, but you can't miss work at all. I wanted to scream at his face for that and curse him off. I didn't and I stopped showing up to work. They called me months later asking when I can come in. I had a new job already and told them, sorry. Thought you knew I wasn't working for y'all anymore. I quit. I got a new job. After a minute of silence I get her okay then and that was that. If you want to get mad at someone for missing work to attend a funeral, be prepared to get shit on for it. 3 years ago I was working for a screen printing company. I had agreed to work there and close down my own operation, with the contingency that during the summer I would be able to leave at 4:30 on Wednesdays to race with my team. I race sailboats competitively. The owner agreed without blinking an eye, which I took as a stand-up guy wanting to have a pleasant work environment. I had started there in the fall, and everything was going well. The work was okay, and I was getting along with the small team of people working there. We had some long nights over the winter, which was fine as there isn't much to do when the snow is flying in our city. Summer came, and it was time for the boss to hold up his end of the bargain. A few Wednesdays went by without issue, but after those weeks things got tense. It started with dirty looks that I was leaving, and soon became verbal cues that I should stay. I had a commitment to the team, which was a bigger part of my life, so I always insisted that I had to leave. Well, one situation got a bit too hot, and I decided to walk out. I told the guy that I was leaving, and if he didn't want me to come back I understood. Fast forward a few hours. The race is done for the night and we are debriefing our performance over drinks. In these debriefs we all get a chance to speak about the race. While everyone else is silent, it comes to my turn, and I let the team know that I quit my job so I could come racing. Everyone falls over backwards laughing. Some thinking I'm crazy. Some giving me high fives. Once the laughter clears out, the owner of the boat looks at me and says, "Oh good. Now you work for me." It's been a great 3 years working for my current company. Roughly 10 or so years ago, I was in high school still and I was working my first job at Taco Bell. I was about a year into my employment when one Taco Sunday, I don't know if they still do this anymore, but it was a day with extremely discounted tacos. I had enough. There were roughly 10 people working, most of them cleaning for a big inspection coming up. There were another 4 people in the front, 1 person on drive-thru and the other 3 just standing around socializing. I was the only one stationed making the orders. I had a dozen orders, all having ridiculous orders of tacos apiece. I called for help multiple times. No one came. The manager knew I was struggling and never once sent someone to help or came to help themselves. Not too long into this bullshit I took off my hat, walked up to the group laughing and talking in the front, handed them my hat and calmly said that I was quitting. Everyone just looked at me shocked as I walked out of the store, never to return. Worked night shift at a 7-11 in the middle of the part of Copenhagen where all the bars and discotheques are. Was robbed 4 times in the first week I was there. Had double-digit people vomit in the store, and were given shit by at least 50 customers over high prices that I had nothing to do with setting. The 4th guy that robbed the place, so high on uppers that he moved his head like it was on a fucking gyro, threatened me with a fucking plastic bottle that he smashed on the counter. When I didn't react quickly enough, because I was trying to get my head around what the fuck he was doing, he lunged across the counter and tried to hit me with that stupid fucking bottle. Was the final straw after all the shit I'd taken the last week. I escorted him outside, in a way I'm not proud of, and then I closed the store and went home. The owner called me like 100 times over the next few days, and I just let it ring. Eventually he sent a letter about calling the cops if I didn't return the clothing and keys. I didn't. And he didn't. Worst fucking job I've ever had. I used to deliver for Google Express, which delivers a lot of products in bulk from Costco. One time I had about 50 deliveries to make and a total of 100 plus parcels. They were mostly 24 packs of water, Gatorade and beer cases. I checked the scale before loading and the scale read 3,000 plus lbs and the van can only carry about 2,000 pounds. I brought that up to my manager and he said I can't leave anything behind at all. I load up the van and take off. About 20 minutes after I left the warehouse, the engine light turns on, so I call my manager and let him know, and he hits me with, "What did you do it? I loaded 3,000 plus lbs in it like you asked me to," I said, and he replies with, "Whatever, we will deal with you later." WTF. At that point I was already annoyed, but then he calls me back and tells me to hurry up with my first 5 deliveries so I can't take a few stops from my co-worker's route because he is not feeling good. I fucking lost it. I told him to go fuck himself. I quit, hung up, and sent him the location where I was leaving the van, and that's it. Never heard from them again, and I still received my last paycheck. Sorry for my broken English. I am still learning. Edit. Thank you everyone for your kind words. I don't usually type a lot of stuff because some people like to make fun of misspelling or grammar errors. Your words really encourage me. So it wasn't sort of straight up sick quit this company altogether. But I was working contract security and my supervisor tries to write me up for leaving 30 minutes after my shift was over when my relief was talking to someone and wasting time before reporting to their post. I walked out, called and told them I wasn't sort signing the write-up papers because they didn't sort have the stone to write me up in person. I called the branch manager the next morning and explained everything to him. I requested reassignment, and then had to provide proof that the guard who was late was my relief, which my supervisor forgot. She texted me in confirmation before lying to the branch manager and telling him that she wasn't sort my relief and that I abandoned my post. About 4 years ago I worked at a very well-known chain restaurant, and I worked every damn position they had, from busing to serving to takeout to hosting to making the damn bread. My management were the most underappreciative pieces of shit I've ever encountered. One day I woke up and realized I was extremely sick but couldn't particularly afford a doctor's visit at that exact moment, so I figured I would stroll over to my job since I worked across the street so that I can give them a visual to my condition, since they wouldn't give a shit over the phone. It was hours before my shift, so I dragged myself to the manager's office looking like I was going to die at any moment. I explained my situation and was told I don't give a shit. You're the only one we have scheduled for this shift today. Delightful. Being the hard worker I am, I decided I was going to go in and not just no call no show. Being the spiteful asshole I am, I also decided that since they were fucking me I was going to fuck them. I waited for the entire restaurant to fill up and empty. I stared at every single filthy table and I took my apron off and I walked directly out the door. I got a plethora of angry calls and voicemails from my manager while I sat on my porch and smoked a big ass joint. Fuck them. One summer during college I found a job selling $1,500 vacuums. The company offered a free room cleaning. We'd go and clean the room, in the process trying to make the sale. I quit within the first week. A few of the things I hated about the job. We had to sing a song together at the start of each shift, and they publicly called out who had made what sales the day before. As the new guy, I had to shadow a veteran. The guy assigned to me liked to drive 120 miles per hour down the highway, weaving super aggressively between cars. I'm an aggressive driver, and I was extremely uncomfortable. I was trying to sell a $1,500 vacuum to people who clearly couldn't afford $1,500 vacuums. But the thing that made me say fuck this, I quit. Finally, on Friday of my first week, I got my first sale. I did the pitch and demonstration, and even the veteran I was with said that it was all mine. When I got my paycheck, I didn't have the commission. I called and asked, and they said, since veteran was with you, he gets the commission. Double quote. I was a housekeeper in a hotel. Love cleaning. Please don't knock it. I was also in laundry, which is much fun. We needed more staff and a co-worker said she knew someone who was looking for a job and is a single mum. Of course. She had a brief interview and was hired. She showed up each day smelling of alcohol and was manipulative. My boss kept her as she felt bad for her. Things would go wrong. This woman would blame me. And the manager genuinely believed her. She said I planted things in her rooms to make it look like she didn't clean, etc. Which was ridiculous. But security cameras would indeed show me going in her rooms because I was authorized to check them for cleanliness. Maybe there was something I could have done. I am not sure. I was truly happy and proud to go there every day. She wrecked it for me. I put in my notice and couldn't even get through those 2 weeks. I said to my boss that if it was all truly me then it would stop when I walked out the door on my last day. But I was done. Apparently things have gotten much worse and I guess she left and fled the province for some guy with money. Which I do not think is a good idea for her kids. I miss my cleaning very much. I miss seeing the customers in the morning and greeting them with a smile. Wishing for them to have a happy and safe day. Now I am saving for a car and some equipment to hopefully clean homes in my city as my own business. I worked in a hospital as a labor and delivery nurse. Hired for the night shift. On New Year's Eve of 1987. I was the only one working in L&D. Common there. But you had no help. It was storming badly that night with near whiteout conditions. In 12 hours. I had 15 babies born during an electrical outage in which the generators failed. I delivered 5 on my own with a flashlight in my mouth while waiting on a doc to get there. 2 were C-sections with only me to assist. Serve as a scrub nurse. And circulate. I had 1 hemorrhage. 2 drug-addicted moms. And 2 sets of twins. All babies and moms were alive. Admitted to their floors. Rooms cleaned. Instruments on to soak. And paperwork finished by 7 AM. My head nurse called me on the carpet for not clocking out to take a break. I told her that I didn't get a break. That L&D nursing is 1:2 ratio, 1 RN to 2 patients, and she was violating safety codes. I threw my keys at her and told her I was called the state. I quit that morning. A week later. They were fined. OB had been shut down. And she was jobless. My next job was as a head nurse. She had no idea I was the one interviewing her when she applied, but needless to say, I didn't hire her. I did roofing and during the summer in middle school. And BTW roofing sucks. It's hot as hell. I was getting paid $5 an hour. Cash under table. Well, I found out at school that roofers are supposed to make a lot of money. I thought I was doing good for my age, so didn't make a big deal about it. That weekend I'm at a job. Carrying shingles up a ladder to the other guys. The homeowner is laying on a floats in his pool. And yells, "I hope you all aren't hot up there?" And starts laughing. I told my boss he need to find other help and climbed off the roof. Walked over the pool and cannonballed in. Homeowner was pissed. I got chewed out by my parents. I felt great about it. My first job working at a butchery in New Zealand. I was employed for 3 hours after school each day to come in and clean the block, large wooden object used to cleave meat. All the knives. The floors etc etc. The main counter for the shop was one of them large windowed. Chilled display case. In the center of this display case was a drain for water and blood. The drain led to a large bucket that needed to be collected. Emptied and cleaned every day. One fine day I finish cleaning the knives and the block in the floor and I head into the front of the shop to collect the bucket, but it's only half full today. I have no idea why. But I say it's half full today. The boss came over and said, "Yep. I bet's blocked again. Looks like some meat got stuck into the drain." He then proceeded to hand me the end of the hose pipe running from the counter to the bucket and says, "Here, suck on this to get clear the pipe." I said, "You are not paying me enough to put that in my mouth." He got upset and said I was lucky to have a job close to school. I just put my stuff down. Took off my oversized apron, started to walk out. Didn't say a word or come back ever again. I worked for a preschool for a short while. And the great thing was that I was allowed to bring my toddler with me. She was a little younger than most of the kids. But no big deal. She sat for story time. Got to learn her letters and colors early. And generally did what the other kids did. The older kids loved her and pretty much made her the class mascot. Unfortunately, my supervising teacher had a problem with me bringing her. Not that I was focusing only on my child. Or that she was a distraction. It was just that bringing a child to a workplace, any workplace, was against her principles. She'd insinuate that I was a bad mom for working in the first place. And that I was neglectful for exposing my daughter to my place of employment. Which, again, was a fucking preschool. Finally, after she had had a particularly rough day, she went off on me for what a terrible mother I am and how I should have my child taken from me. And that she'd be making a call to CPS. And that I was fired. She didn't have that authority. I simply handed her my keys. Told her to never contact me again. And walked out. Called the director that afternoon. Filled her in. And thanked her for the opportunity. Supervising teacher got fired the next day. I worked as a server at a bar during college. The head bartender each day was in charge of assigning tables to the server. There was one bartender who really didn't like me, and every time she worked, she would give me the worst tables so that I wouldn't make as much in tips. She also did the scheduling. She started only scheduling me for slow times early in the day. Like during lunch when we would have 50% off lunch specials. It sucked. But fair enough. She does the scheduling and I needed the money. Well, it just got worse and worse until I was barely making minimum wage, even though I was making close to $20 an hour when I started. One day, during a slow lunch, I was working with a different bartender. When the bartender's shift ended, the other bartender who did the scheduling came in to take over. I was serving a large table of probably 15 people. Probably the best table I had had in a week or so. She saw this and decided to reassign tables and work as a server as well as bartender. She of course took my table and said it was now hers. Even though I had been serving them for about an hour and they were almost done with their meal. This wasn't the first time. But it was the last straw for me. I went up to the table. Explained the situation. And instead of just transferring the table, I cashed them out. Which they were happy to do. So I collected the cash tip. Told the bartender fuck you. I quit. And walked out with the tip from the table and never talked to anyone at that bar again. I found a better job the next day. I put in my resignation, after 5 years there. And on my very last day they wanted me to train the lead tech on everything I did. I had already done this twice before. I was making minimum wage and she was making at least $13 an hour, so I said no. I was told by the director, is this really how you want to leave? It's very unprofessional and I'm disappointed in you. I cry easy. And this was like the third or fourth time they'd made me cry in a year. So I went and packed up my stuff. Left my badge. And went home. I started at 10 and was out by like 11:30. It was just the final straw, the fucked up year and a half of stress, hate, and anxiety. Fuck that job. Fuck those people. And fuck my previous supervisor and director. Worked behind a bar in a pub. Should have quit the night. A drunk threw a punch at the heavily pregnant landlady and it descended into a massive fight, but the police couldn't be called because it was a lock-in, illegally serving after hours. Instead, quit the night. The bosses had decided not to bother turning up for their shift but send a friend instead, who just wanted to go to bed at the end of the evening and hurried me through clearing up. I got an irate call from the landlord the next day about a broken glass in a part of the pub I knew I'd left spotless. And just thought, nah. I worked as lead CNC machinist for a job shop. And when a supervisor position opened up, they hired a 20-something kid that was the son of friends of the general manager, who constantly covered up his incompetence. The kid knew next to nothing about CNC machining, but was given the job of writing the code, doing setups, etc. I often spent more of my time rewriting the code and fixing the improper setups than getting any production done. One day, the kid substituted a smaller drill on a lathe and offset the location from center to drill a hole, rather than use the proper drill size. This was in a high nickel marine grade stainless steel, which is hard on tools to begin with. This was a time critical job, and he had failed to pre-order the right tools. But rather than admit he screwed up and go get the right drill from a local supplier real quick, just kludged it, knowing that he would never be blamed. He then left for the day, knowing that it was going to fail. The drill blew right on schedule, and the general manager started screaming at me. As usual, the look on his face when I just calmly told him to fuck off and started packing up my tools was priceless. I was already planning to give notice anyway, and had already made arrangements on another job. So just told the new employer that I would be available early and went on my way. I never have found out what happened to the GM, the kid, or the company after that. Frankly, don't really care. I do know the GM told the owner that it was my fault due to the way the owner treated me when I came in to pick up my final check. And the GM hovered over me to make sure I didn't get a chance to talk to the owner about what was really going on, escorting me in and out. I left laughing at him. Close bracket. I got my first job as a cashier at a trashy Circle K next to a shady bar. Not a fucking day would go by without some creep commenting on my then very obviously underage appearance. I assumed it was normal. I had to deal with smokers having breakdowns because I didn't sort out their brand. Annoying gambling addicts clogging up the line at peak hours to validate and rebuy 20+ tickets a day, and drunks coming in and eating things before paying. I was also expected to stay 45 minutes after my shift to sort recycled beer bottles. One day when I was about 3 months in, I was kept 5 extra hours without prior notice because a co-worker had an accident and my manager wouldn't want to call someone else in. So I finished in the middle of the night and was set to start again at 5 AM on Saturday. You can just imagine how a Friday night next to a bar looks like. I was just about to finish my soul-sucking shift when a kid threw up on the floor. Didn't bother to show up the next day. On the bright side, I got a job at a fast food joint, and turns out dealing with harassment and theft isn't all that normal in student jobs. Was a cell phone tower climber. Winds were pretty high, right on the edge of where we should have called the day off. Foreman was a drunk whose wife thought he was sober. He would close the bar down every night we were on the road, as did most of the climbers. A few hours in, the winds keep getting gustier. Foreman wants to finish the job. By the end, I remember just trying to get the cable stable on the tower, leaning off as far as I could to bring it back in, and then pinning it to the steel while my co-worker attached it to the tower. Mind you, this is heavy cable. A bit more than a pound per foot up a 300-foot tower. Those things get moving. If it falls and gets damaged, it is expensive. And if it hits someone, they're going to the ER. I kept my calm through the day. But it wasn't the first day of overlooking as many safety precautions as possible. People free climbing, dropping tools from height, etc. Obnoxiously, the pay wasn't even good. The cell phone companies contract out to construction management firms who contract to smaller fly-by-night crews. There is no money at the bottom of that crappy ladder. I was hired by a company that recruited me hard. During the interviews, they kept telling me I would be a great fit and was the right man for the job. I truly believe they thought that because they paid me a shit ton of money, which is why I accepted the job. It's a long story, but after a month I knew I wasn't capable of doing the job, and they decided to leave a lot of those job descriptions out during the interview. I was confused, angry, annoyed, etc. I spent the next 4 months applying for other jobs and going through interviews while I was still working there, and I just told them I was visiting customers. I started at a new job and they kept paying me until they realized I didn't work there anymore. I have no shame. I had worked street at university for 23 years. There were over 7,700 staff and I think I had met half of them by then. Working as a senior field IT tech was awesome for the first 20 years. They were very flexible and I had lots of side gigs. In the end, the bean counters came in and made things more efficient by outsourcing many tasks. Usually they were those fun things, The last year was very repetitive and mundane. Lots of problems that we couldn't fix because they were someone else's problems. One day I came in and attempted to resolve 7 different problems. And I was shut down on each because they each had their own team of people whose responsibility it was. I said fuck this. What do you need me for? Went straight to HR to quit. Belinda, the HR manager, was not your typical cliched type. Isod fixed her PC before and knew her. She said, "Don't quit today. Take the weekend. Wait until Monday. And see how you feel thence." I took her advice, temporarily retracting my signed resignation, and went home. On Monday the largest round of redundancies were announced in the university's long history. Because of the enterprise bargaining agreement. The payouts were incredible. My accountant, when he saw how much was being offered, suggested they had made a mistake, and called on my behalf to check if it was correct. It was effectively 2 years' salary, after tax. I would have missed out if Belinda had accepted my resignation.